You thought Dataverse was included, didn't you? You installed Power Apps, connected your SharePoint list, and then, surprise, a message popped up asking for premium licensing. Congratulations, you've just discovered the subtle art of Microsoft's not technically a hidden fee. Your Power Apps project, born innocent as a digital form replacement, is suddenly demanding a subscription model that could fund a small village. You didn't break anything. You just connected the wrong data source. And Dataverse, bless its enterprise heart, decided you must now pay for the privilege of doing things correctly. Here's the trap. Everyone assumes Dataverse comes with Microsoft 365. After all, you already pay for Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, even Viva because someone said collaboration. So naturally, Dataverse should be part of the same family. Nope, it's the fancy cousin. They show up at family reunions but invoice you afterward. So, let's address the uncomfortable truth. Dataverse can double or triple your Power Apps cost if you don't know how it's structured. It's powerful, yes, but it's not automatically the right choice. The same way owning a Ferrari is not the right choice for your morning coffee run. Today we're dissecting the Dataverse cost illusion, why your budget explodes, which licensing myths Microsoft marketing quietly tiptoes around, and the cheaper setups that do 80% of the job without a single premium connector. And stay to the end, because I'm revealing one cost-cutting secret Microsoft will never put in a slide deck. Spoiler, it's legal, just unprofitable for them. So let's begin where every finance headache starts. Misunderstood features wrapped in optimistic assumptions. The Dataverse delusion. Why projects go over budget. Here's the thing most people never calculate. Dataverse carries what I call an invisible premium. Not a single line item says, surprise, this costs triple, but every part of it quietly adds a paywall. First you buy your Power Apps license. Fine. Then you learn that the per-app plan doesn't cover certain operations, add another license tier. Then you realize storage is built separately, database, file, and log categories that refuse to share space. Each tier has a different rate, measured in gigabytes and regret. And of course, you'll need environments, plural, because your test version shouldn't share a backend with production. Duplicate one environment and watch your costs politely double. Create a sandbox for quality assurance and congratulations, you now have a subscription zoo. Dataverse makes accountants nostalgic for Oracle's simplicity. Users think they're paying for an ordinary database. They're not. Dataverse isn't just a database. It's a managed data platform wrapped in compliance layers, integration endpoints, and table-level security policies designed for enterprises that fear audits more than hackers. You're leasing a luxury sedan when all you needed was a bicycle with gears. Picture Dataverse as that sedan. Leather seats, redundant airbags, telemetry everywhere. Perfect if you're driving an international logistics company. Utterly absurd if you just need to manage vacation requests. Yet teams justify it with the same logic toddlers use for buying fireworks. It looks impressive. Cost escalation happens silently. You start with 10 users on one Canvas app, manageable. Then another department says, can we join? You add users, which multiplies licensing. Multiply environments for dev, test, and prod. Add connectors to keep data synced with other systems. Suddenly, your internal form costs more than your CRM. And storage, the storage. Dataverse divides its hoard into 3 categories: database, file, and log. The database covers your structured tables. The file tier stores attachments you promised nobody would upload, but they always do. Then logs track every activity because apparently you enjoy paying for your own audit trail. Each category builds independently, so a single Power App can quietly chew through capacity like a bored hamster eating cables. Now sprinkle API limits. Every action against Dataverse, create, read, update, delete, counts toward a throttling quota. When you cross it, automation slows or outright fails. You can solve that by upgrading users to higher tier licenses. Delightful, isn't it? Pay to unthrottle your own automation. These invisible charges cascade into business pain. Budgets burst, adoption stalls, and the IT department questions every low-code project submitted henceforth. Users retreat to their beloved Excel sheets, muttering that low-code was high cost all along. Leadership grows suspicious of anything branded power, because the bill certainly was. But before we condemn Dataverse entirely, it's worth noting this complexity exists because Dataverse is doing a lot behind the scenes. Role-based security, relational integrity, transactional consistency across APIs, things SharePoint lists simply pretend to do. The problem is that most organizations don't need all of it at once, yet they pay for it immediately. So when you see a Power Apps quote balloon from hundreds to thousands of dollars per month, you're not watching mismanagement. You're witnessing premature modernization. The tools aren't wrong, the timing is. Most teams adopt Dataverse before their data justifies it, and then spend months defending a luxury car they never drive above second gear. Understanding why it hurts is easy. Predicting when it will hurt, that's harder. And that's exactly what we'll unpack next, because the licensing layer hides even more booby traps than the platform itself. Stay with me. You'll want a calculator handy. Licensing landmines, the 3 myths that drain your budget. Myth number 1. Everyone in your organization is automatically covered by Microsoft 365. Logical, yes. True, absolutely not. Power Apps and Dataverse operate on a separate set of licenses, per app and per user models that live blissfully outside your M365 subscription. That means your standard E3 or E5 user, the ones you're paying good money for, can create a form tied to SharePoint lists all day long. But the second they connect to Dataverse, the system politely informs them they now require an additional license. It's the software equivalent of paying for both business class and the meal. This catches even seasoned IT professionals. They assume Power Apps belongs to the suite, like Word belongs to Office. But Dataverse is classed as a premium service. So every user who interacts with data stored inside it needs that premium tag. It doesn't matter if they just open the app once. Licensing math doesn't care about your intent, only your connection string. Most organizations realize this about 5 hours before go live, when the error banners start shouting requires premium license. And the calculator shock follows quickly. The per app plan looks affordable until you notice that you have more than one app. Multiply that by environments, then by users. Each multi-app environment needs multiple entitlements. Essentially, every expansion of functionality compounds the cost. The trick Microsoft marketing never says out loud: Dataverse licensing scales geometrically, not linearly. A few small apps can balloon into a corporate-sized invoice almost overnight. Myth number 2. External users are free through portals. They are not. Once upon a time, you could invite guests through Azure AD and think you'd bypass the toll booth. Then Dataverse reminded everyone that external engagement is still consumption of capacity. Whether it's a public-facing portal or a supplier dashboard, the interactions consume authenticated sessions measured against your tenant. That translates into additional cost either per login or per capacity pack, depending on your portal configuration. The free guest misconception stems from how Microsoft treats Azure AD guest users in Teams or SharePoint. They cost nothing there. But Dataverse plays a different game. When data sits behind a model-driven app or a Power Pages portal, every visitor touches that data through Dataverse APIs. You pay for those transactions. Worse, you also inherit the compliance overhead, GDPR, auditing, and log storage, which aren't guest discounted. So that external survey you thought would be free suddenly operates like a billable SaaS service you accidentally launched. Now, myth number 3, storage is cheap. No, storage was cheap back when your data lived in shared SharePoint libraries. Dataverse, by contrast, divides its storage by species, database, file, and log, and builds each one separately. The database tier holds structured tables. The file tier takes attachments and images. The log tier keeps change history. Each tier has its own price per gigabyte per month. Add to that the fact that every environment gets only a microscopic starter quota, and you discover the miracle of compound storage inflation. Let's illustrate that in slow motion. A small Power Apps deployment with 50 users might come with a few gigs of capacity. Sounds fine until those users start uploading attachments. Suddenly, the file storage alone passes the baseline. You upgrade. Then logs accumulate because governance demands auditing. Upgrade again. For mid-size enterprises, that cost can outpace licensing itself, especially if automation systems are constantly writing and deleting data. The smarter way to handle this is to forecast. Capacity equals environments multiplied by apps, multiplied by users, multiplied by storage multipliers. That formula isn't printed anywhere official, but every experienced Power Platform architect knows it by heart. You can roughly predict when Dataverse will start nibbling through your budget just by charting those dimensions. Every new environment, double storage overhead. Every connector writing audit logs, add capacity packs. Dataverse behaves like a living organism. Feed it data, and it grows hungrier. But the budget pain isn't inevitable. Architects who plan mixed licensing regimes, perhaps using per-app plans for light users and full per-user plans for builders, can shave significant cost. Likewise, not every integration requires Dataverse. Many business functions can pull the same data through standard connectors hitting SQL Server, Excel, or SharePoint lists. The experience differs slightly, but the savings are immediate. Think of it as designing plumbing for a building. You don't run industrial-grade pipes through every restroom. You size them according to flow. A hybrid Power App setup, Dataverse for your core records, lists for casual data, is practically invisible to end users yet dramatically cheaper to maintain. You sacrifice a bit of centralized elegance for financial sanity. Even if you survive this licensing labyrinth with your budget intact, the next trap isn't financial at all, it's physical. Performance, scale, and latency add their own invisible taxes. And that's where we move next, because surviving the math is one thing, surviving physics is another. Performance and scale, when Dataverse actually makes sense. Here's the biggest misconception of all. Dataverse doesn't automatically make your app faster. People assume that because it sounds official, enterprise-grade data platform, their sluggish forms will suddenly turn into Formula One dashboards. The truth, Dataverse can be astonishingly fast, but only when your design deserves it. If your queries are inefficient, if your delegation settings are lazy, Dataverse will simply charge you more for the privilege of being slow. Performance issues start where ambition exceeds understanding. Canvas apps pull data through connectors, and those connectors obey delegation limits, the ceiling on how much data can be processed server-side before Power Apps gives up and downloads everything locally. If your filter logic isn't delegable, Dataverse won't fix it. It'll happily stream thousands of rows to your user's browser like a garden hose pushing syrup. You'll blame the platform. The problem? Your query syntax. Then comes environment placement. Every Dataverse environment sits in a physical region. Place your production environment in Europe and ask an American team to use it, and they'll experience lag measured in coffee sips. The network doesn't care about your global ambitions. If latency exceeds a few hundred milliseconds per call, screens crawl. Dataverse doesn't teleport data. It still moves through cables owned by physics. Now let's clarify when Dataverse actually earns its price. 3 scenarios justify the premium. First, multi-app ecosystems. When multiple Power Apps, Power Automate flows, or even Power BI reports share the same tables and need consistent security. Second, advanced role-based access control, where table and column permissions must mirror corporate HR structures. Third, deeply relational data models. Think end-to-end relationships, transactional consistency, and cascading rules across entities. Those are Dataverse's natural habitat. If you're just capturing daily inspections or vacation requests, you don't need cross-table referential integrity, you need speed and simplicity. But if you're managing supply chain data where a single record update triggers workflows across departments with conflicting permissions, welcome to Dataverse territory. It's designed to enforce consistency when human error is unaffordable. Let me put it bluntly, Dataverse isn't about speed, it's about scale under governance. SharePoint lists excel at small team convenience. SQL excels at raw query performance when managed by IT. Dataverse sits in between, structured enough for compliance, flexible enough for low-code builders. It's the neutral zone where citizen developers can create without immediately violating audit policy. Still, scaling Dataverse requires understanding its physical thresholds. Each environment enforces API call limits, roughly the heartbeat of your tenant. Each table supports relational dependencies up to certain levels before query plans grow inefficient. Even data row limits exist. Adding hundreds of thousands of records works, but only if you design indices, filter views, and column data types properly. Treat it like an Excel sheet, and it will perform like one. Region latency matters too. Dataverse doesn't replicate instantly between geographies. If your data crosses borders, say a reporting app in the UK connecting to a production environment hosted in North America, expect delayed consistency. Microsoft guarantees reliability, not instantaneous mirroring. If you're architecting global workflows, buffer your triggers and avoid assumptions about real-time updates. Here's a quick micro-story. A consulting team once built an operations tracker in SharePoint lists. It worked fine, until 500 concurrent users began editing at once. SharePoint limits simultaneous writes, collisions multiplied, records vanished. They migrated to Dataverse after hitting concurrency failure 10 times in a week. Once migrated, performance stabilized because Dataverse handles transactional writes atomically. In plain English, it stops 2 users from overwriting each other's work. That's worth paying for, but I've also seen teams go the opposite route. Overbuilt Dataverse backends powering one tiny Canvas app. Every change triggered cascading flows. The app loaded unnecessary tables, and soon it took 15 seconds just to open a form. Users revolted back to Excel. The irony? Moving that same app to a SharePoint list restored instant performance and saved thousands per month. So that's the litmus test. Choose Dataverse when consistency and security outrank latency complaints. If regulatory line items, audit tracking, and unified schemas dominate your design meetings, Dataverse's overhead is justified. If not, the platform turns into a bureaucratic bottleneck disguised as innovation. The architecture sweet spot looks like this. Centralized enterprise records live in Dataverse. Peripheral apps surface subsets of that data through Power Apps or Power Automate. You establish a thin, governed core with flexible spokes. That design scales because each spoke operates semi-independently while the core maintains truth. Remember, Dataverse is not an automatic performance boost. It's a resilience framework. It prevents your low-code environment from collapsing when you scale beyond human coordination. Use it to impose order, not to chase milliseconds. Once you internalize that distinction, budget discussions suddenly make sense. And now that you know where Dataverse's physics start to pay off, let's pivot to something far more grounded, the cheaper, saner routes that offer most of its benefits without the corporate-grade invoice. Smarter alternatives, SharePoint lists, SQL, and hybrid options. Let's step off the Dataverse roller coaster and look at saner rides, because not every Power Apps project requires a data platform that could double as an audit defense system. Sometimes you just need something lightweight, comprehensible, and free of hidden multipliers. Enter the alternatives, SharePoint lists, SQL Server, and the hybrid combinations that quietly deliver 90% of Dataverse's capability at a fraction of the cost. First, the underdog unfairly dismissed at every architecture meeting, SharePoint lists. Despite rumors of its demise, Lists remains alive, supported, and terrifyingly efficient for small or moderately complex apps. It lives inside your existing Microsoft 365 license. Translation, you're already paying for it. For workloads under roughly 100,000 items per list, it can perform surprisingly well. You get versioning, attachments, permissions by user or group, and power-level integration with Power Automate and Power Apps. Yet consultants arrive, squint at your lists, and pronounce that real apps use Dataverse. That's like shaming someone for using a sedan instead of leasing a semi-truck to deliver groceries. Lists handle CRUD operations over OData v4, support formula columns, and respond to triggers. The fundamentals of any Power App. They're not deprecated, they're just unglamorous. The true limitation lies in scalability, concurrent edits, API throttles, and lookup relationships. When you start building multi-list joins or enforcing record-level security beyond site boundaries, lists groan audibly. But if your data fits on one team site and your users count in dozens, not thousands, SharePoint remains the rational default. Then we have SQL Server, the grown-up still living in IT's basement. SQL offers raw performance, full query control, indexing, and relational modeling far beyond low-code comfort zones. With premium connectors, you can tap it from Power Apps without invoking Dataverse at all. The catch? Someone needs to manage it. You trade low-code convenience for DBA discipline, security patches, schema drift, capacity planning. For departments with IT support, this is trivial. For citizen developers working under governance radar, it's nightmare fuel. But SQL carries one unbeatable quality: predictable pricing. You pay once for infrastructure or use Azure SQL with transparent compute and storage tiers. No mystery gigabyte categories, no per environment capacity packs. If your organization already runs SQL Server internally, linking Power Apps directly can bypass beaucoup licensing cost while providing professional-grade performance. It's not as turnkey as Dataverse, but it doesn't charge enterprise premiums to behave rationally. Now, the hybrid model, the architecture equivalent of a balanced diet. Here you mix Dataverse where structure and security matter with cheaper layers where agility and experimentation reign. Imagine storing your mission-critical master data, customers, product SKUs, controlled vocabularies, inside Dataverse. Then build satellite Power Apps that collect or display contextual information through SharePoint lists. The hub retains integrity, the spokes stay lightweight. This hybrid approach dodges the all-or-nothing trap. Power Apps can reference multiple data sources within one environment. For example, an events management app might read speaker data from Dataverse because HR demands encryption, but collect session feedback through a list so interns can edit without premium licenses. Both coexist seamlessly through Power Automate flows. You get Dataverse's relational power only where it's justified. Governance types love to say, standardize everything. That's expensive dogma. Standardization belongs where compliance risk is high, not in every inventory tracker or meeting scheduler. Hybrid models embrace diversity. Boolean fields can live in lists. Transactional tables belong in Dataverse. Analytics end up in Power BI datasets or SQL. The art lies in drawing boundaries according to cost and sensitivity, not brand alignment. A brief word on performance. SharePoint lists respond faster for small workloads because their API stack is thinner. Each call does less validation. Once you pass workload thresholds or introduce cross-site joins, SQL leaps ahead. Dataverse sits comfortably between, prioritizing consistency checks over sheer speed, understanding that physics saves hours of debugging mythical slowdowns. Now, when should you still choose Dataverse despite these cheaper alternatives? When regulatory audit, record immutability, and fine-grained security outweigh storage cost. Financial systems, medical logs, intellectual property repositories. These require schema enforcement and transactional isolation. Everything else? Start cheaper and promote only when necessary. This decision isn't sentiment, it's economics. Dataverse is the Ferrari with impeccable engineering. SharePoint lists are the reliable sedan that performs fine until you attach a trailer. SQL Server is the freight truck, high upkeep, infinite torque. Mix them intelligently and you'll stop confusing engineering prestige with business value. Fit Dataverse to need not status. When someone insists every Power App must use it for standardization, kindly remind them that standardization also applies to bankruptcy filings. Once you internalize that, you're ready for the real maturity test. Discipline before development. Because tools don't bankrupt projects. Unasked questions do. Implementation discipline. Questions to ask before you build. Every over-budget Power Apps project begins with a blank canvas and no interrogation phase. Builders jump straight to forms and colors, then panic when licensing alerts appear. Let's correct that. Before writing a single formula, ask 3 deceptively boring questions. Question 1. Who owns the data? If ownership resides with IT, Dataverse, or SQL makes sense, they provide central control and audit trails. If ownership stays with the department, use SharePoint where the site admin can self-serve. Ownership defines governance, which defines platform. Creating a Dataverse table that no one officially maintains is how shadow databases are born. Expensive, invisible liabilities with no steward. Question 2. What's the expected scale? Storage, API usage, and external traffic. Most teams guess and overshoot. A few thousand records per month means lists or Azure SQL with minimal cost. Tens of millions? Dataverse or proper SQL? Estimate transaction volume, map automation triggers, understand that every on-add item flow consumes API calls. Treat Dataverse capacity like fuel, you budget it deliberately. Question 3. Which compliance or security obligations justify premium licensing? Role-based access, encryption, field-level audit, use them only if regulations demand it, otherwise you're purchasing paranoia. Dataverse's granularity is vital in regulated industries, unnecessary for vacation calendars. Once these questions have answers, draft a cost model, users X, apps X, environments X, data categories. It doesn't need decimals, it needs direction. If your prototype already skews costly, simplify now instead of retrofitting later. This is where collaboration saves money. Business users understand process, IT understands constraints. Merge them. Let it preview the architecture before departments unleash low-code enthusiasm. That single conversation prevents half of all future license escalations. Adopt the prototype with lists, graduate to Dataverse strategy. Start with the free foundation. If it crumbles under concurrency or security requirements, migrate. Dataverse's import tools handle schema elevation gracefully, whereas downgrading is agony. Think of it as academic progression. Bachelor's in lists, master's in Dataverse. Skip grades and you pay tuition forever. Implement a checklist mindset. Before approval, ensure each app owner can answer. What data volume and growth rate are expected? Where will files and logs physically reside? Who has permission to create new environments? How will licensing scale as departments adopt? Force yourself through that ritual and cost becomes predictable by design. The last principle, Dataverse is a tool, not an identity badge. Using it doesn't prove maturity, it proves procurement capacity. Your credibility rests on delivering stable, maintainable apps with minimal waste. That means knowing when a humble list will suffice and when governance truly demands premium architecture. So, before another Power Apps kickoff dazzles stakeholders with buzzwords, pause. Treat Dataverse as a question, not an answer. The smartest builders design budgets as carefully as tables. Do that, and your next app will impress for functionality, not for how painfully it inflated the finance report. The Dataverse reality check. Here's the blunt truth. Dataverse isn't a scam, it's just misunderstood. It was built for enterprise governance, not departmental wish lists. Its power is unquestionable. Row-level security, transactional integrity, centralized schema management. But power without proportion equals waste. Treat it as your first resort and you'll learn the mathematics of regret. Treat it as your graduation platform and it becomes the backbone of scaled success. The key lesson is brutally simple. Dataverse delivers value only when governance demands it. Every feature you enable, auditing, environment isolation, capacity expansion, targets control at a cost. If that control isn't protecting something critical, you're funding bureaucracy, not progress. Low code doesn't mean low cost when you ignore architecture math. Licensing remains the invisible villain. Many projects fail not from bad design, but from unchecked entitlement sprawl. Forecast the capacity. Question whether every user truly needs premium access. Separate experimentation from production. The cheapest app is the one that never crosses the premium threshold until the data insists. Start small. Prototype in lists or SQL. Measure what breaks, then escalate carefully. Dataverse rewards intentional scaling. Its efficiency emerges only under pressure worth paying for. Everything before that is ego accounting disguised as modernization. So the next time someone says, we'll just use Dataverse, it's enterprise, respond appropriately. So is the bill. Because apparently, reading Microsoft's pricing matrix now qualifies as an advanced certification exam. If you learned how to save money today, return the favor. Subscribe to the M365 show. Each episode cuts through licensing mythology and teaches architecture that respects both tech and budget. Intelligence saves dollars, rebellion wastes them. Choose intelligence, press follow, and let efficiency be your next subscription tier.